Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome, dear viewers, brothers and sisters, to our video related to modern issues, a discussion on Dr. Hatem El Haj and Dr. Yasir Qadhi's recent video on modern issues, which cover apostasy and gender roles. Today, this is our third session, second in the series, but third will appear the third instance on YouTube. And this occasion, the two sheikhs are discussing the issue of gender roles and qawama and also free mixing. So it's not overly complex issues from a fiqh point of view, but it's certainly something worth getting the professor's input, because just to recap, the professor, Dr. Muhammad al-Masri, goes straight to the text and doesn't bog himself down with things like insistence on what classical scholars says. He reviews what they say and he goes back to the text to find strongest supporting view on any given issue. This may require a level of research. It may require, and does indeed require, checking isnads and hadith and the whole gambit. But what you get out of the end of it is something closest to what you can imagine Allah, His Messenger, has revealed to us. Obviously, somebody else can supersede this, but the professor makes best efforts going back to the text. And that's ultimately what we have to do as believers, is going back to the text, not going back to Imam Shafi, not going back to Imam Malik, going back to the primary sources. That's what we've been left with. So I will play the session, and on the timestamp from the original video is 36 minutes, 19 seconds in. The professor will interject at certain points. I can even prompt the professor if I think there's something worth commenting on there and then, or when the professor feels necessary, he can interject as need be, and I will pause. So 36 minutes 19 into the video, and a link will be provided to the original video.
Done. Marriage and gender, one of the most sensitive topics of our times, and we have strong feelings from the side of many of our sisters, from the side of many of our brothers. We have the rise of radical feminism, we have the rise of the red pill and alpha masculinity. It's just a whole bunch of stuff going on here. So let's try to have some, inshallah, deconstruction of this sensitive topic. Do you believe that Islam has come with specific gender roles?
No, of course, yes, it has come with specific gender roles, and no one can argue about this. But like I said, your understanding may not be necessarily what Islam is about. There is a spectrum of different interpretations that you have to be aware of the spectrum. That is the sa'a, that is knowing the disagreement between the scholars. It will give you this broadness of your horizons and your approach to things. So you have to know what Islam says. And when Islam says more than one thing, that is basically we have different interpretations, and no one can say mine is Islam. There are matters of agreement between the scholars, and then we can comfortably say this is what Islam says. But oftentimes there are disagreements, and in this case, you can't say this is what Islam says. When we had this discussion, the Supreme Court talked about abortion. You should not be saying this is what Islam says. Islam says so many things about abortion. So when you say that my interpretation is Islam, I think that this is just self-deluded, self-conceited, too arrogant.
So before we get to the specific issues, can you give us? I know you have an entire book, by the way. He has an entire book, Sheikh Hatem has an entire book on gender roles and gender interactions, right? Yeah. So can you summarize in just a few minutes some of the main points that you believe Islam has come with, that we can definitively, categorically state that of the roles of a man in Islam and of the roles of women in Islam? So in a nutshell.
Okay. So one of the things that Islam clearly basically prescribes here is that there will be some degree of responsibility and authority for the man within the household.
Okay, well.
So الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم. That's the verse 34 in Surah An-Nisa. So men have qawama, and here's the problem that we fall in sometimes when, I would like to be a Muslim apologist. I understand apologetics a little bit differently. Apologetics or being a Muslim apologist is not about apologizing on behalf of Allah. No, it's, the word comes from defense, to put like a systematic defense, or to put together a systematic defense for, your deen or your particular doctrines, or the apologia, that comes from the apologia, and how, Socrates basically, it was Plato calling the Socrates' defense of himself in the court apologia. So this is where it comes from. It is to defend your deen. It is not to apologize on behalf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah does not need anyone to apologize on his behalf. Of course not.
Yeah.
But anyway, what Islamic Muslim apologists often do is...
Sorry, yeah.
Should you interject here a bit?
Whenever you want, whenever you want.
So this, I think from the beginning there's a problem for the question of Sheikh Yasir Qadhi seems to be starting from rather apology in the sense of apologizing, not in the sense of defending a point of view. Actually, the issues raised in modern time between so-called feminism and alpha masculinism and all these things, which as a counter-reaction to feminism, these are in the recent time, let's say in the recent few centuries, two last centuries, roughly the 2 last centuries, these have arisen. There are issues in the Islamic domain in time past. I will come to that, but let's see now. We're talking about now, this century, 20th and maybe the 19th century. The issues arose essentially in the West. That's why they arose. In the Muslim world, things were stagnant for several centuries, and there's a major deviation from the revelation, starting essentially with the deviation of Muawiyyah and the ruling system, and other things. Interestingly, is connected. Someone say, "Oh, Mysyaar is back to his Muawiyyah issue." I will explain later why Muawiyyah is a major component in this affair. But let us go to Europe. The basic vision of the European to women and men is essentially either based on the accumulated traditions of Indo-Germans and those tribes who essentially the dominant tribes in the last 2,000 to 3,000 years in Europe, essentially mid-Asian or mid-Russian barbarian, Indo-German, you call him whatever. They were living in a barbaric life, essentially living near to the law of the jungle, essentially. Law of the jungle. The stronger takes everything and the weaker has to perish. That's essentially what was there. With a bit obviously humanitarian aspect coming here and there from some tradition and from some religions, but that's essentially what was there. Barbaric state of affairs in the European tribes, mostly Indo-Germans, etc., Celts, etc. They are all Indo-Germans and their cousins. That's the haplogroup R, essentially, which is dominant in Europe. Then Christianity took over and became dominant. Before that, there were pagan religions, in which some of them are having male dominance, some have feminine dominance, but mostly male dominance also. Although some religions are really feminine dominated, and there are goddesses, but usually the main god is a male god in some sense. Although some the other branch of the Indo-German going to India, in some branches, they have the female god, which is the major goddess or deity. So that's what the starting point. Then Christianity became dominant, became the one dominated the thoughts and so on and the spirituality of Europe for about a millennium until the Renaissance started. People started working on that and trying to get rid of it because it shows in the reality and also in intellectualism and science major issues and contradictions. But the issues of men and women were not raised yet in the Enlightenment and after that to any great extent. Only in the 19th century, when other issues came forward, essentially disbelieving in the revelation and the religion. So what was the Judeo-Christianic tradition, which is at least in matter of spirituality, women and men, etc., meaning of life, the dominant point of view. Never really the dominant point of view in political interaction and affairs. one reason of that, just a quick mention, is that Christianity regards itself as attributed to Saint Paul of Tarsus, saying that the kingdom of Christ is the other worldly kingdom. This world is not his kingdom. Forget about that. So you have to essentially submit to the emperor and he's like our madkhali essentially. Although some part in his letter to the Romans, I think chapter 13, part of it seems to be fabricated. It's not from Paul. It seems to be later addition to be more submissive to the Romans. So Paul is not an extreme madkhali after all. But independent of that, that's a fundamental point of view, essentially Judeo-Christian. Now the vision of the Judeo-Christian about the world, how man is created, what's position in the universe, is essentially based on that what we have in Genesis, the creation story. The creation story there is fundamentally, which the Quran brings upside down, completely annihilated, is that man was created and then woman was created from somebody, a part of it. That may be metaphorical actually, but the people misunderstood and regard this materially. And there's some stories claiming that a part of Adam's body has been taken and fashioned in a woman. I think that this may be not a very good, not a very lucky expression of a metaphorical expression that which the Quran said, خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها. This could be, some people interpreted that Eve or the woman created from Adam's rib and so on. There's a hadith also, that narration was clearly metaphorical. Hadith is very clearly metaphorical, but the people misunderstood it and tried to explain it using the Old Testament. That's a secondary point. Are you created? Some people regard that as an essential point. Are you created, a woman created from man, or man created from woman, or both created from mud? Is this creation going over 4 billion years in an evolution, or is it suddenly? I think getting stuck with that is a sign of let's say, shallow mentality, inability to understand things in its real depth. That may be metaphorical, but the problem is that the story of the fall. First of all, the snake or the devil or whatever you wish to call it, or represent it as a snake, whispered initially to the woman and persuaded the woman to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who prohibited from taking from the certain tree. And then the woman, after that, she persuaded her husband. So the woman is the one, is the source of the evil, because all the universal development of that is based on that fall, especially for Christianity, because that fall needed a sacrifice to atone for it, and the sacrifice must be so high that the Son of God has to die on the cross for that. In some reason, sacrifice or ransom, depending on various interpretations. Some people sacrifice to please God, another people said a ransom to the devil to release the devil, the humanity from the clutch of the devil. That's obviously philosophical answer on point of view. We don't need to go to discuss that very, but that's it. But who started what initiated the fall? The woman, and she persuaded the husband. And then in the Old Testament it says in Genesis, God came looking in the garden. Where are you? They were hiding. And they say, we are naked. We want to weave some clothes. So, how do you know that you are naked? Did you eat from the tree? And then Adam said, the woman ate and persuaded me. And the woman said, the snake persuaded me. And then the story continues. So from the first moment, the woman is the guilty one, is the bad one, is the evil one, almost as evil as the snake. The man has been persuaded by her and brought to the fall. The husband, the Adam, the male. And then they are chucked out of paradise. Metaphorical, we don't need to discuss where is this paradise. Some people get involved with that. This is a joke. I may discuss it another occasion. I discussed it in the tafsir sessions. And the woman has been first allegedly they were actually eternal, but this way death came to the world because of this sin, so that there was no death. And the woman was condemned. She was not menstruating, so she is now condemned to menstruate and have suffering in childbirth, which allegedly was before that supposed to be painless and hunky-dory. So that's the story. So from the beginning, the woman is a problem. Fundamentally, is a problem. It's an inferior being to humans and to men, and humanity essentially is a man thing. And this is expressed in the European language and most languages, the Arabic also. Rajul, although most people say Rajul means a man, a male man, But in reality, rajul means man, and like in English, mean a human being, essentially. And this is the reason some people say Aisha was a rajula min nisa, a man-like from woman, because actually rajul is essentially a man, although in Arabic, rajul is rarely used for both genders. In English is man does this, no man does that, meaning no human being does that. In the European language also. So there's more weight on a manhood, on the word man in the European language than in Arabic. Maybe that's just a side note. And the Shah's father were discussing for centuries if women are really having a soul and they will be resurrected the qiyamah. If they don't have a soul, they will not be resurrected. They're just like a container for babies and producing babies. And the common law, I don't think this is it is hinted, and maybe someone is enshrined that actually according to the Old Testament as written, which is full tons of fabrication and lies and so on. It is not the revelation as it said. Is that she is owned by her father, and then the father sells her essentially. The dowry in the Old Testament is essentially a price for a woman, sell her to the husband. And the husband owns her after that and owns her wealth essentially. So doesn't own her. She has no ownership. She has no control over her own destiny in that sense. She's owned by her father. And as a matter of fact, that's the English common law, which remains the common law until very recently in England and America. Common law in America is a branch of the common law in England until the 70s of the last century. Imagine that. Until the 70s, there were Supreme Court rulings which finally abrogated that and made having women their own identity, etc. Well, there was an interesting ruling. A man who was facing jail and so on and needed to pay some penalties or pay a certain bail, and then he sold the furniture of the house without the consent of his wife. And then the wife said, he did not ask for my consent, that sale should be negated. And the man said, no, he has the right to dispatch with the ownership, etc. And the matter went all the way to the Supreme Court. And in 1975, the Supreme Court affirmed that the man can sell without his wife's consent. Later, a few years later, one of the states issued a law, and this was overturned, and it was overturned by the Supreme Court of the top level, that was owned by both together cannot be sold without the consent of the other. At last, woman got the right of ownership. So that's the background. In that background, women have to struggle in the 19th century to get voting rights. In that background, they have to struggle after that to get other rights, including all the long fight until the Supreme Court. I think in Britain it was a little bit before or after. I don't know what the common law situation, but clearly I don't think the common law says in Britain otherwise until very recently also. I don't know if it has been overturned formally. We didn't have a test case here, but I think they regard also what the American courts do as also reasonable precedences to be applied in the English courts. In addition to that, for example, the issue of adultery. You see, the common law gives the husband, the case of the wife adultery, the right to demand compensation from the adulterer, the one who violated his right. So the wife body is actually owned by him. And they usually analyze that by saying, this is like trespassing in your land. If you have a land and someone trespasses in that land, then you have the right to kick him out, you have the right to ask for compensation. Possibly in old times, you have even the right to shoot him. The same applies for someone committing adultery. So it's the right of the husband. It's not having nothing to do with the divine rights or violating the divine injunction. If the husband approves, it's hunky-dory, no problem. So that's the background. That's the background. Coming from a culture in which women are essentially the sinful part of humanity, the most dangerous part, the part who has essentially fundamentally no rights, no ownership rights, that doesn't even own her own body. And that's the reason we have now the movement for feminists, my body is my choice, and things like that. That's the background. Islam is complete. Let's go to the text, fundamentally the text. It's clearly not the case. First of all, the story of Adam, the Quran corrected that fundamentally. Nowhere in the Quran is, first of all, the Quran doesn't mention the name of the wife of Adam as Eve or Hawa. Nowhere. That's in some weak hadith, most likely they are fabricated. The moment you see in any hadith the word Hawa is most likely a mistake of some of the companions or some people below that. But we are not going to go into the fine details. But no respectable, authentic hadith is having Hawa in it. Yes, I know in Bukhari there's the hadith where it notes for Hawa, no female would or no woman would betray her husband. But that hadith is well established up to Abu Huraira, and most likely Abu Huraira heard it from Ka'b al-Ahbar, and it interfered in his mind with a prophetic statement. It's not a prophetic statement. It's impossible to be a prophetic statement. We can check that in the bin right away. That's one example where you find in some called Sahih books, something with Hawa or something like that. So the Quran is clear from page 1 to the last page, 600 something, in the usual Ottomani printing, 603 pages, that the one who committed the sin, the one who disobeyed, is Adam. Also, the Quran corrects a major blunder of the Old Testament, is that in the Old Testament is that one of the arguments of the devil, the snake, to the wife, to the woman, and to the man, is that this prohibition is only because the God or the gods do not want you to become knowledgeable, to compete with them in knowledge, to know the difference between good and evil. You do not believe that. It's shocking. While the Quran stresses that the main aspect in Adam creation and the reason of arguing to the angels, which is not depicted in the Old Testament, is that Allah created a being who has sufficient rationality that he can invent or create names for everything. So he got all the knowledge, in that opposite. So the devil would not have come to them and said that you are prohibited from the tree because if you eat from the tree, you know the difference between good and evil, and you compete with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or with God or the gods. From the Old Testament is a little obscure there. The word gods is very obscure. Sometimes it means the chieftains, so between the Supreme Council, which Allah and the angels, and the position of the angels is very obscure. Are they divine or not divine or half divine? But we don't go into these far philosophical points. Let's go in a simple-minded level. So that's the Quran destroyed that completely. What did the devil use to instigate Adam is that if you eat from tree, you will become eternal. So he knows that he's not eternal. He is going to die. He sees things around him dying and perishing and so on. And the paradise here, the Garden of Eden there, is actually some place, most likely in Abyssinia. It's not in the sky or heaven like many people think. If they read the Quran, try to interpret by using the Old Testament. It's manifestly clear that it is on earth. So that was the idea. Then you may become you become eternal and become holy and pure like the angels. That's the trick used by the devil. Not that you become knowledgeable like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's demolished by the Quran completely. And actually in the dialogue and the dispute in the supreme audience is about, are you going to put the creation on earth with shed blood, etc., etc.? Say, I know more than you know. And then he taught Adam the naming, gave the rationality to name, and then challenged the angels to do the same. They were not able. They are not created to have this facility. They are more like natural forces. But we're not going also to the nature of the angels, what they are they metaphorical or not. We don't go to that. But whatever they are, real entities, persons, they are definitely relatively deficient in matter of rationality compared to humans, according to the Quran. There's no doubt of that. In matter of rationality, human beings are above the angels in that sense. So they don't need to strive, but the devil went from that weak point. They are holy and pure. Try to compete with them, but not a matter of knowledge. So that's one another correction of the Quran. So fundamentally, and the honoring, the dignification of the humans is for all the children of Adam. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. Bani, the word bani, if used like that, means both male and female. We have dignified the offsprings of Adam, and we carry them on the sea, etc. This applies for men and women generally. So the dignification is because of being human, being according to the expression of the Old Testament and some weak ahadith or middle ahadith created in the image of Allah, meaning having rationality and free will. That's the image of Allah. Some people think the image of Allah is having two eyes and the beard, long beard. Not that. That's obviously simple-minded way of looking at things. But most people will be simple-minded. And also Christianity took liberty in depicting Allah in pictures, an old man with a white beard and his son to the right and the husband to the left, things like that. Just forgive that. We don't get stuck with that too much. That will not bring very much further, but it's obviously a pure depiction of something metaphysical, something supernatural. So that's the starting point. And the whole Quran is essentially about all addresses. I think this agreement of all scholars that any address in the Quran to the believers is for men and women, even if women are not specified. Yes, Hadith for women usually is for specific things for women, and then it is not for men. And usually the context is very clear that it's only for women. But it's very few injunctions for the Quran, specifically for women, or very few injunctions for men. Very few. Generally, that's the address. And the address in the Arab language, there's general agreement that whatever mentioned in the male form is also applying for the female, etc. So there is no issue there that they're in the fundamental creation that they are having the same level of dignity, the same level of inequality. Obviously, we see physically that they are structured physiologically different. Clearly, they have the different physiological structure, no doubt. And obviously, the chemical composition, the hormones, and so on are different. Nobody can deny except someone who's mentally deranged. The result of that, by divine injunction, is that certain limited area of life, men have been given certain rights and responsibilities, mostly responsibility more than women, and in certain areas, women have given more actually rights, less responsibility than men. Usually in the family life, with the issue of qawama, I will address later, but that's it. And then where else is there something like that? And the issue of covering our ransom, because obviously we know it by necessity. We don't need to fool ourselves. Unless you have a gay or homosexual or sodomic, Sodom and Gomorrah inclination, you will not be excited by a man rounded buttock, unless you are queer or what is. They don't like that word, but I'm using it. I'm not politically correct. I am not trying to be politically correct. But from a woman, you will be excited. I remember myself, we were once in a seminar, and there was someone sitting in the front there. I was a little bit in the back, and he had long hair and very nice and so on. He's sitting on a chair, so his body form is not clear, but the hair and so on, I couldn't see the face, only the side. Say, what a beautiful woman. I felt the usual feeling, a man. I was a young man in the 60s, have to a woman. He turned how he has a beard as a man. Immediately excited, subsides. That's his hormones. That's natural reaction. Nothing can be done about that. And that has to be attended to somehow. The Quran attended to that woman body being obviously having what it has of matter of sexual appeal more than men's body, which is a fact. Nobody can deny. Only if someone is going to extremes and claiming otherwise. I think independent medical experiments have shown that, and there's no need to discuss it. So women are asked the ayah of tell the believer to lower their gaze, etc., and to protect their chastity, etc. That's more pure for them. And tell the believing women to do the same. It's repeated again, and add to that they should turn their khamar on their neck and so on, and do not show any there of their beautification and internal clothing except to husbands. The ayah is well known. That's one situation where women are specifically. In the case of family life, men have given qawama, and there's a dispute about the meaning of qawama, obviously because of historical misdirection on the Islamic thought and the Islamic narratives. That has been understood, qawama meaning a command, and he's the order and so on, which is clearly not that what the ayah means. That's clearly what the accumulated amount of a hadith does not support, just the opposite, doesn't support that. So that's it. So starting with accepting the internal Western dialogue and which is Judeo-Christianic and European essentially dialogue, which they have the internal problems because of their inherited misconception and misunderstanding of the story of creation, and obviously the considerable amount of fabrication and lies in their own scriptures. That is not our issue. That's their issue. We should not have accepted that as we should have clarified. This applies for you. It's not. It's none of our business. Clear your own house. Our house is, yes, it has certain mess created by ourselves because of certain ignoring of our own understanding of the revelation and misunderstanding of certain ayahs like ayat al-qawama and ayat al-nushuz, those who are rebel with nashes, nushuz meaning the correct meaning when they take all evidences together. For example, that an ashes has to be admonished, or the bedroom should be first forsaken, but forsaken only by a husband who lives in the other room, not by leaving the house. He's not allowed to leave the house, for example. That's clarified by Prophet Hadith. And then a light beating, which is the That's those who refuse intercourse. Has nothing to do disobedience or obedience or all these things. That's all created by the imagination of the early generation. That has strengthened, but that by the change of the perception to man and woman, which Islam brought to the Arabs. The Arabs were living essentially in semi-barbaric state of affairs, slightly modified by some inherited rules and manners from the religion of Ismail. But this related essentially only to monotheism. The legal system was most likely based on tribalism and so on. It's unlikely that what the laws they were applying are really coming from any scripture. Or possibly the earlier revelation did not address that too much. Possibly, we don't know. Because we cannot ascertain what really the commands addressed to women and so on in the religion of Ibrahim and the religion of Musa. Because the existing literature and alleged books are contaminated, and just a casual look to it shows there's horrendous fabrication and lies. So we cannot take them as authority. So even if they essentially stress the same masculine attitude and so on, there is no evidence that this comes from the old revelation. Maybe the old revelation has some of that suitable for that generation of human beings and their level of civilization and culture, not yet ready. But when Islam came, it was clear. It abrogated all of these Jahiliyyah issues one by one in a clear way. And most of the Sahaba understood that to a great extent. But such a huge transition in a time, and this transition is not happening because there were women doing a demonstration asking for rights. No, it was initiated by the revelation. It came to nobody's mind. It was shocking for many people. They were surprised about these things. It came from heaven, not from earth, not from Muhammad. Muhammad has no business to be a pro-feminist or anti-feminist. But when the counter-revolution led by Muawiyyah, which want to go to Jahiliyyah, want to go abolishing Shura, want to go to abolishing essentially Islam ultimately, came, then quite a number of fabrication related to the issue, the conflict between Ali, Muawiyyah, and Aisha, for example, the fabricated hadith. No people will succeed if they give their authority to a woman. It's a fabricated by the one son of Abu Bakr. Our research is complete about it. And this has been attacked in recent years very heavily by some modern scholars who recognize there must be some problem there. Definitely there's a problem there in that hadith. But we have now clarified how it was created, what was the reason behind it, and where is really in matter of the reference chain and so on, where is the disease. Another one, another famous hadith that which people say is in this form in Bukhari also, alleged themselves say, I didn't say anyone who is will take a sound man's mind out of the way, although you are deficient in religion, in piety, and in mind. And that is not a statement of the Prophet. We have evidences now. People left all translation and so on. This is a statement of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud at best. And some Sahaba took it thinking he's reporting it from Messenger of Allah. That's not true. That's simply not true. It's a fabricated hadith. Not intentionally fabricated, but fabricated. It's not. The Messenger did not utter it. Attributing to the Messenger of Allah is a fabrication. Intentionally would be a major crime or even a kufr. Non-intentionally is a mistake. It has to be exposed either way, but it's not what came from Messenger of Allah. Also, other issues of nushuz and things like that. If you summarize all the issues of so-called wilayatul nikah, who is a wali. Before Islam, the father, as we said, essentially like the Judeo-Christian traditions and the barbaric tradition, essentially owns the woman, the girl, and you have to pay him compensation. Until now in Africa, in many tribes, you have to pay like 50 cows. That's a substantial amount of money. That's not symbolic, that's substantial. Or another way of some tribes approach it, you go snatch the woman you like and then run away in the wilderness. And then you fight the people off and show that you are a real man. You can take her further. Then Otem say, okay, let's negotiate. And then negotiate a price. You have to see that first. And things like that. That's how humanity developed in ancient times. That's what the reality of humanity without revelation. It will be really motivated, moved by muscle force and by instinct and hormones. That's the law of the jungle, essentially. That's not the law of Allah. So that was the situation that the father owns the girl, and he is the one who decided about her marriage, adult or not adult, previously married or not previously married. And when a man dies, then his son, the oldest son, has the right for his other wives, except the mother. The mother was a matter of incest, which the Arab did not go to that extreme. Other cultures may have that extreme, I don't know, but maybe the Pharaoh in time past. I am not sure if a Pharaoh allows someone to marry his mother, but definitely they allow and they encourage marrying their own sister. And that's the reason most mummies are having so genetic deformities and because of this extreme incest in Pharaoh's families. But that's not our issue today. So the oldest son has the right either to take care for himself, essentially inheriting her. They don't call it inheritance, but yeah, or prevent her from marriage until she pays some compensation, buy her free, or block her from marriage for the rest of her life. That's adl, called adl. All of that is there. And then this was abrogated one by one. Ultimately, abrogating that the wilaya of the father even is limited to advisory and encouraged obviously for the virgin never married, but it's not obligatory. The Hadith in Bukhari and other circumstances show it's not obligatory. Even a not previously married bikr, although it's encouraged because she has no experience and Islamic society does not have a boyfriend girlfriend relation and no previous experiences, so it's highly wise to those who have no experience to have the advice of their father for women specifically, because the men are the one pursuing, the women are the one the part of humanity was hunted, was courted by men. Women usually do not court men. Usually, even in the loose Western society, it's men who are courting women generally. That's whether and the rules and regulation come from the general natural situation, biological, usual natural situation. So it's advisable that the father will represent his daughter by, it's essentially an attorney having a power of attorney by law. She doesn't need to go to the court and make a power of attorney for her father to act in her. That's only for the father, by the way. She doesn't need this, automatically have this right. Nobody else have that. That's it. If she has been previously married or widowed, that's over. It's not even, I don't think it's even encouraged that the father should conclude the marriage. And there's a hadith even in Mustadrak al-Hakim saying, al-Bikr, al-Thayyib awla binafsiha. She has more capability of managing her affairs than anybody else, including her father. Wal-Bikr yuzawijuha abuha. And the Bikr get married by her father action. The hadith now say, cannot marry without her father consent. No, yuzawijuha abuha. That should be the normal case. He should be taking care of these affairs until she gets the first marriage. After that, widowed, divorced, and so on, she managed the affair by herself. Father has no say. Even before that, he's expected, because the biological father and natural situation by human beings, the father cares for your own children, male and female alike. So he would be taking care of her interest, negotiating with the husband, set the condition, because in Islam, the marriage is a contract. You can negotiate considerable condition. You can enforce certain things against the husband. You can make precautions for your daughter and so on. And he's being an experienced man, obviously grown up, many more years of experience, would be trying to get the best for his daughter. So it's advisable. Al-Bikr yuzawijuha abuha. Thayyib awla binafsiha. The one previously married should take care of her by herself. It doesn't mean that she cannot appoint someone to be or tell her father, conclude in my behalf. That's okay. And this usually in the Islamic tradition, out of respect for the father or for an older uncle or for older marital uncle and so for marital side, mother side, and so on. Yes, but the hadith is very clear. That's the only one which shows that there is definitely but bikr a matter of walaya. But if you look at it carefully, it doesn't construct an obligation. All other hadith usually narrated, they contradict the Quran. Nevertheless, because of the backlash into Jahiliyyah led by Muawiyyah, starting with his shura and governance, but also in matter of women. When my research, inshallah, our research is completed about the issue of the faulty of the fabricated hadith that women are deficient in piety and in mind, there are quite a number of hadith going back to Muawiyyah trying to enforce that and try to declare women to be fundamentally fasiq, fundamentally rebellious, and things like that. He's obviously coming from a background of like Old Testament background and things like that, which he could not overcome because he's a munafiq. He could not overcome the things of thoughts of Jahiliyyah. So this is an Islamic pure point of view that in the family life, there's a need in someone who have because human children, one of the main functions of marriage is not only to have sexual enjoyment, but also to have tranquility, to have love and affection, to have mercy, caring for each other. That's fundamental. But also to continue procreation, the human species. That's a fundamental aspect. Now, humans need, until they become out of age, they need a lot of attention and full devotion. For that, physiologically and psychologically, women are more suited. So they are supposed to be taking care of the motherhood duty, taking care of the kids, etc. While then, what will be the function of the husbands? The function of the husbands in this, although he take care and part of that, but only a very small part. The main part is for the mother. The husband part is to be the bread earner. He's the one who supports the family financially, the one who works outside. So it looks like there's a gender role. It is not. What is there is a specialization that getting a new generation of humans up to maturity so they can take care of themselves, then the parents will be sufficiently, most likely will become old and then pass away, and this generation will be giving the torch of life for the next generation until Allah decides to end the world. But this is Allah's decision, nobody's decision. Therefore, monk and monastery is discouraged strongly in Islam, and there's a prohibition of castration and self-castration and slave castration, despite abusing Islamic history for that also. So this the fundamental philosophical aspect has to be stressed. So when the feminist and the alpha male advocates come forward, tell them stop it. This is the disease in our, yes, we have a disease in our house, homegrown, or actually in a counter-revolution grown by the chieftains of Kufr and Nifaq and Quraysh, like Muawiyyah and Abu Sufyan and others, which tried to infest Islamic life and contaminate it, and succeeded partly. And unfortunately, the majority of scholars after that did not really elevate themselves above that. I took some of these fabricated hadith on board, and some of them were fighting it. For example, the famous hadith which they used that whatever a woman marries without the permission of her wali, and when in the presence of two just witnesses, her nikah is batil. This hadith is batil, it's well known as batil. Nevertheless, you find people fighting for that with claw and teeth, because it fits their misconception and their jahiliyyah mentality, which has been coming back in vengeance with Muawiyyah usurping power and trying to undermine Islam and annihilated community. He did not succeed. Alhamdulillah, he will never succeed. Nobody will succeed, because the dhikr, the Quran, is protected. And also Sunnah in totality, and protected in a sense we detailed in the book of Tawheed. But the Quran is sufficient for that. It's protected. But they contaminate Islamic life. And majority of scholars started from this. And they were never until very recently, and except few minorities, were never able to graduate out of that, unfortunately. So we have our own diseases. We have to clean our own house. It's not that you are responsible for everything. No. We have also mess we have filth in our backyard. We have to clean our backyard also, definitely. No doubt about that. We don't go indulging in defense for that. But the reality of the universe, of the creation, of that's the decision of Allah in the foundation of the world, that the being who will have sufficient rationality and sufficient free will to be semi-divine and ascend higher and higher, become Rabbani, higher and higher, are humans. And they are produced by a process of man and woman. Maybe there's no way to produce this kind of creature except by such a process. I doubt. I think it's possible. In another universe, it could be, there would be being like humans with this capacity who don't have male and female. They just procreate by splitting into, maybe. I have difficulty imagining rationally that a finite, limited being will be able to develop, will be to progress to the level of this mental capability, which is based on certain level of brain and certain hormones and so on, without really male-female. I don't think amoeba-like procreation will develop any way to. But this may be my misconception. Allah's power is is unlimited, but not to the impossible, to the all possibility. It may be possible, but in this universe, all high-level life forms are usually male-female. The low level are one gender, and they procreate by splitting or sprouting. The moment you want a more complex life form, a more sophisticated level of brain, it has to be male and female. There's no escape. In this universe, at least, maybe in this possible other universes someone could imagine. I have difficulty imagining that would be possible. It seems to be the creation needs man, woman. Everything is in pairs, positive charge, negative charge. There seems to be a necessity of being a created contingent being. But we don't go into, I don't want to go into philosophy. So that's it. And that has to be managed. And managed in such a way that protects the dignity of this being, which Allah dignified by giving reason and free will. And for that to be developed to the most perfect form, it is the regulation of qawama, for example, in the family life. Someone must be responsible for bread earning. Let me give you an example. There was a discussion, someone with David Rockefeller, about women work and so on. And he said, David Rockefeller, well-known man with the background, I don't want to appeal background of Freemasonry and all these conspiracy theories, but these capitalist billionaires, he asked this guy, why do you think we encouraged women to come after especially the Second World War? First World War was dictated by necessity, even in Britain. Women were really housewives only, to come for the work. So because women have rights and want to inform, or simple-minded. No. Half of the society were working unproductively for us, the banker and the one who have the power and the money, but productive for the human species, for the households. We cannot tax them. You cannot tax a woman for working at home. There's no way you can formulate it in a legally binding way. So what to do? We got them in the working field, and this way we can tax them. And the result is that ultimately, not immediately, but over one generation or two, when the 50s, you have the middle class, usually the standard is the husband works. His paycheck is enough for 2 cars, a car for him to go to work, and the car for the wife to take the kids to school and for shopping. The wife is devoted to the home. The home is in a tranquil atmosphere. They cannot take care of the kids. The kids can be grown up nicely. Obviously, there's other deficiency in the thoughts of the West and the way they look to the life, which resulted in the problems of the 60s and 70s. But there's another issue. And they can afford a reasonable life, and they can afford the mortgage. At the end of their life, they can keep the house for their own children, or one of the children at least. Now, the same situation, most middle-class people with 2 paychecks, they cannot afford even 1 car. Most of them cannot afford even 1 car. And one of them said, I saw once a tweet, one of them saying, my grandfather had this situation. He was working. My grandmother was at home. She had a car for the household. He has a car, and they paid their often mortgage. And my parents, my father inherited that house. He said, I am now with my wife. We are working. We don't have enough income. Sometimes when we go to the supermarket, we check, we find some nice, superior type of bread with seeds and so on. And we have to look at it. Could we afford that or not? Affording superior type of bread being discussed by husband and wife, who both are working. So there's, and for the capitalists and for the Illuminati and the Freemasons, some people say Jews, and I don't care about these conspiracy theories. For those who have the power and who want to have the money and the control, it's better for them women to go for work. This way they can pay men less, because the moment women start coming in the workforce with big numbers, then the capitalists are the one who own the production means and so on, were able to negotiate with men lower wages. You accept, although we can't get them. They will accept low wages. It's coming new now. They don't have really that market yet. So you just accept. So the men's wages, which were sufficient for the whole household, came down, and the woman took a share of it, and they became somehow near equal, not completely equal. Women still are earning less than men for the same work. And both together, after taxation and so on, some tax law try to take care of that, and tax pairs a little bit different and so on. But even after that, they end worse off. So it's clear.
Sheikh, how much is this attributed to the usury system as opposed to just market conditions around?
The usury system is that what produces a huge capitalism, and the capitalists want more money and create money out of nothing and lend it, take, etc. It is the usury system is fundamentally behind that.
This has been exacerbated. The reason I ask is in this actual lecture, they make some interesting points around how some developments were influenced not so much philosophically, but more by technology. But that's much later on in this video.
That's maybe secondary things, but the fundamental point is that does not mean that women were not working and were not allowed to work. There are some people think that women have to stay home and they are not allowed to work, and this is the ideal situation. No, this is the natural situation, and it should be like that. But to make that clear at certain Islam, that the natural situation will become the normal one, is that the whole support of the household is obligatory on the man, not on the woman. The woman is not obliged, to the extent that if she is rich for whatever reason, she inherited, because she has now her own character, her ownership in Islam. She has complete ownership, sovereignty over her own money. She doesn't have to take even your husband's advice about her point of view of selling and buying and doing things. To such extent that if she is rich and he is poor, she can give him from a charity, from zakah, because he's not obliged to spend. But he cannot give her from his zakah, because he's obliged to spend to fulfill the needs. It cannot be allowed for him, if he has enough wealth, to keep her in the level of faqir or miskin, or under the poverty level, in such a way that she become eligible for his zakah. No, it will never happen. He has to spend on her in such a way that she is out of poverty level, and then whatever after that is taxable with zakah will go to other ways. It will not go to the wife or the children. Even the children, you can't give your children, but a woman can give her children from zakah, because she's not obliged to support them. It's for the husband to support. So this making that clear legally forces a social structure in which that essentially happens in the golden time of America after the Second World War, that mostly women will be managing the household as a charitable act, by the way. For example, Hazm's point of view, which is very well grounded and sounded, is that she is not obliged. Actually, the husband is the one who should clean the house, to mop the floor, so things like that. But and some argue that Sahabi women are doing that. They say, yes, Sahabi women are charitable. They do it as a charity for the husband and to keep the peace and that nice level. And then the husband is working and so on, and the wife regard as a charity. But if it comes to a dispute, then accounts must be held and the wealth must be split accordingly. So that's it. But this is almost disappeared from Islamic marital law and the case of dispute. And if a husband divorces his wife, does he have some right in his money, and all of these things? That's how the sweet. Some more ijtihad must be done, going back to essentially what the Hadith says, the authentic Hadith in its totality, and also what the Quran says. It's more important than the Hadith, and also maybe from the classical scholars, maybe even Hazm is one of the best. Because he said the obligation is clear. Because one Bedouin asked him, say, Allah, I will not be able to see you often. I'm far away in the desert. Tell me what's my obligation, my rights on my wife, and her rights on me. And the Prophet mentioned 4 things started. She is obliged to fulfill your sexual needs whenever you want, unless she is having a good reason or not, sickness or menstruation or pregnancy or something like that. She's not allowed to say no. That's it. Otherwise, marriage does not make any sense. Secondly, she is not permitted to allow in your house anybody, even if it's close family for side, without your permission. She can say, oh, this is my father or my uncle. I love him very much. He's a mahram. He can come in the house, and I allow him. Say, no, I don't like your uncle. He should not come in my house, in your house. You know, and 2 other things I don't remember, not in this level. None of them cleaning or mopping or anything like that. And his obligation to his wife is that you feed her as you feed yourself, you clothe her as you clothe yourself. You don't swear at her. You don't say, may Allah deface you, may Allah make you ugly, and you don't slap in the face. If you slap in the face, she has the right to divorce. It's clearly in the Hadith that this has been swept under the floor, like many other things have been swept under the floor. Most importantly, accounting rulers and pulling the sword in their faces when they become tyrannical. So it's swept under the floor, unfortunately. That's the filth in our backyard, which we have to clear. And it's as major as the issue with which had happened to women. One of the worst, obviously, the fabricated hadith, nobody will succeed who appoint a woman in the leadership position. That has been used by these Jahiliyyah masculinism, and they saying, oh, this way they cannot be judged. They cannot be some scholar even hasn't believed that hadith is correct, and he said she can be everything except the head of the state, because this is Wali al-Amr genuinely. Hizb ut-Tahrir also adopted that she can be anything except head of it, and he said, except the judge of in the grievance court, which have the authority to remove the Khalifa from office, because he's done really having a higher position in command than the Khalifa in the case of a rule case, which the Khalifa need to be removed. That's the ijtihad of Hadith, because they believe this Hadith. That's the only reason, for example. So this one fabricated Hadith did a lot of damage in Islamic history. And few other fabricated Hadiths completed the picture. And they were taken eagerly with Muawiyyah and his allies and the tribal mentality of the Arabs. Yes, Islam removed a lot of that, but you don't expect such a revolution to go in such a deep, especially such Jahiliyyah issues, which arrogance, masculinism, tribalism, and so on. Messenger Allah said clearly, there will be issues of Jahiliyyah which you will barely able to overcome. That's being arrogant about your own genealogy, attacking other people's genealogy and deface them regarding lower, and the fakhr bil ahsab, al-ta'n fil ansab, wal-istiqlab, claiming the rain is because of these star constellation, otherwise we will not have got a rain, which is not true, etc. Things like that. They're difficult to get because they seem to be synchronized with people's psychology and enforced by millennia of tradition that they're difficult to go. But they must be fought. They must be worked against. They must be worked against. It's very difficult to overcome them. But they remained, and they took, with the moment the counter-revolution against Islam succeeded under Muawiyyah, and they came bit by bit in many areas. Not only that, also in the area of accounting rulers. In other aspects of life, political, bay'ah, etc., it's very clear. The Quran is very clear. The believing going to give bay'ah exactly like a believing men. No difference. No difference. They participate in accounting the rulers, which is our commanding good and forbidding evil in its fundamental part. The most fundamental part of commanding good and forbidding evil is accounting the ruler. And the same characteristic. المؤمنون والمؤمنات بعضهم أولياء بعض. The Quran stresses المؤمنون والمؤمنات to remove any idea that's only for men. بعضهم أولياء. They are allies and supporters and belonging to each other. What's it? يقيمون الصلاة ويأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر ويطيعون الله ورسوله. They establish prayer. Their life is around prayer. Allah is the center of their life. They give charity. They perform commanding good and forbidding, meaning accounting the rulers in its most important and pure form, and obey Allah and His Messenger. These will have the mercy of Allah. These will have the mercy of Allah. So it's clear. I think so. The starting point with the both sheikhs is although he discussed that apologetic, meaning defending, and not, you don't need to defend. It defends itself.
Yeah,
you need to prove to the others that this is a revelation, and it has to be followed. That's that. If you call that defense, fine. But it's not the defense. This is a positive proof. So we should never be in a defensive position in these issues.
Yeah, in their defense, they haven't gone from this defensive posture necessarily, but they will be clarifying. So what I'll do is I'll play it in full, and just interject whenever you feel necessary, because there are some areas that are going through like careers and some of the stuff you've already covered in terms of contracts and the other practical aspects to talk about in terms of equity, earning, and even things in issues of like talaq in the current situation whereby there's a reduced earning capacity for women. But I'll let them clarify, inshallah.
That sometimes when they are not guided, when they are not grounded in Islamic knowledge, and where they're trying to be a little too hasty to conform to circumstantial variables, they can do like sort of detrimental patchwork, where they can try to sort of patch different value systems in a way that results in inequity, injustice, eventually. So if you say, for instance, that the Rijal qawwamuna 'ala an-nisa, qawama is not about authority whatsoever, it is simply about responsibility. Whoever said that responsibility and authority can be divorced from each other? Like, whoever said that someone can basically have obligations put on them without corresponding rights? Whoever said that you could be the president of a country and have responsibilities only and have no rights? What sense is there? Is no sense in that whatsoever. So then we have to have basically a moderate, truly moderate understanding of what that concept is about, that qawama is about. Is responsibility and authority at the same time. And kharaj bid-daman, it's, profit basically is linked to liability. It's always like this. These concepts go hand in hand. So now the qawama, we have to agree that it means both responsibility and authority. But now, for instance, some people think that there is a particular arrangement that is called Islamic for the household, for instance. Can women have careers? Well, nowadays, the problem is many people think that all the changes in the reality are caused by basically the trickle-down effect of philosophy and thought and stuff like this, and you can push back by counter philosophies, counter thoughts. No, that's not true. Technological advancements have caused a lot more changes. So the changes in our reality owe more to Newton than they owe to Voltaire. They owe more to technological advancement.
That's a nice way to phrase it. I'm going to cut that, Sheikh, if you don't mind.
Yeah, they owe more to technological advancement than they
To intellectual thinkers.
And science affected philosophy in the last 200 years more than philosophy affected science. So things, the Industrial Revolution, slavery,
and they have been banned after the Industrial
colonialism, slavery. There are so many things that changed in our reality, not because of intellectuals or the trickle down of philosophy, or because of real, tangible changes in reality, in people's reality. So now, in the past, and that's a problem that our Muslim women also need to understand, that it was not the tyranny of men that kept them from realizing their potential. It was just not doable. Like, nowadays women have close to the earning potential of men, right? Not exactly there, but very close. Many women have like a higher earning potential. In many fields, they have equal earning potential or even higher earning potential. But generally speaking, they're not quite there. So the CEOs of the Fortune 500 companies are mainly men. The wealthiest 100 people are mostly men, etc., etc. So they're not there yet, and they may never be there. But in the past, it was not like basically like a conspiracy, like a made conspiracy against them to deprive them of earning potential. What were the jobs that were available? Blacksmithing, fighting, generally
for them it was nurses and teaching.
Yeah. So there were many professions that they were not basically suitable for. They were not suitable for. They were not going to be like, and fighting was not basically like nowadays, like you press a button and you drop a bomb. No, it was like it required a lot of physical.
This again, some of these arguments are also faulty. They're not persuasive. For example, some of the jobs he mentioned, like blacksmithing and fighting. Fighting is not a job at that time. The people are volunteers and they're financing themselves. And also, most fighting requires body strength, which physiologically not available. We know that for sport competition now, and the issues about men who convert to women allegedly, and they want to compete, and they win all medals and so on, because simply they have. And there was discussion, should we give them hormones or not give them hormones? All of these issues, because people are going the unnatural way. They are trying to change the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what the devil told Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the challenge. Give me time until Yawm al-Qiyamah. I will misguide them. I will tell them to associate with your partners, and they will instigate them to change the creation of Allah. Many people in time fast said, what's this creation of Allah? Simple-minded answer, like tattoo, not growing beards and things like that. No, that's not. That is not. It is really mutilation, and also these modern mutilation of gender change and things like that. Anyway, so that's not. But what's available, for example, let's for example that his point of view is also faulty historically. In agriculture, they were participating in the plantation and everything, and we have the hadith of Jabir. His auntie was, I think, either widowed or divorced. I don't remember now. Don't take me for that. And some people gave her the fatwa. You should not leave home until the iddah is over, something like that. And then she asked Jabir, I have she has palm trees, and they have to go to do jidad, and I have to harvest the dates. Oh no, I cannot hire someone. I don't have enough money for that. There's few palm trees. I have to do it by myself. But they claim I cannot go out. So he went to Inshallah, said, my auntie is this situation, and people told her you cannot go out. Say, who told them that? Let her go out, harvest her date trees. This way she may accumulate some wealth, she can support herself, and she can give that from charity. He's encouraging her to go out. Well, So that's what in matter of attending the animals and being shepherd and so on. It is well known. I don't know if it was a time of the before Islam, but I think it's the same situation because the Bedouins in Arabia until very recently, now all are settled essentially. Until recently, most work done with shepherd work is done by young boys and by young girls and with women, not with men. Even people attack Bedouin men that they sit there in the tent having like a chat all day while their women are the one grazing the animals. So I don't think it's the issue of job sense. I think he's looking to history not in a correct way. No, it was never like that. The problem is that it was regarding that they should do that because they had duty to the husband. That's the problem, by misinterpretation of the scripture. That's the problem. Not the problem they were doing it or not doing it. They're capable of doing it. Concerning fighting, usually physiologically, women are not the one who could be really holding the sword fight. There are few women who can do, and they did. We have Nusayba bint Ka'b. She fought even in Yamama against the Murtaddin and few others. Some women fought in Uhud and did achieve considerable. When the Muslim army almost were forced back up to the tents, which were fired in the back, their women there fought the Romans with the tent poles and so on, and defeated them and pushed them back. So they were not participating in the battle; they were waiting there, but they were like a back support. But it was not the usual way that women will be because if you want women to be fighter in that sense, like in Spartacus, they have to change the physiology. They needed to cut their because usually use the right arm for fighting. They have to cut the right breast, which is obviously defacing and ugly and nasty. So I think the argument is not persuasive to me. It's not to technology. It is the attitude and the way of thinking.
I think this is probably because it's framed more towards the West and the Western experience prior to, the advent of World War II and just after then when the women started to enter the workforce. I think this is probably the European experience.
Yeah, that's the European. It's not our experience. Our experience is the wrong understanding of the scripture and the general, like for example, with آية القوامة. What's the آية القوامة say? الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم. He gives two reasons for the men are responsible. قوام is standing for. قوام standing for. Like Allah قيوم السماوات والأرض. He's the one stand to keep the heavens and earth. It's not that he commands or not command. That's a result of being the creator and the supreme Lord. But he is the one keeping them. If he leaves them, they will go and disappear. Allah hold the heavens and earth from disappearing. If he will lose the control for even a millionth of a second, they will disappear like a shadow. They will be gone. الله يمسك السماوات والأرض أن تزولا ولئن زالتا إن أمسكهم من أحد من بعده. That's the meaning of قيوم السماوات والأرض. The one who's standing and holding them from disappearing, keeping them in existence continuously. It's not that he creates and I can't turn away and forget about them. No, they will disappear. He has to look at them and care for them continuously. He holds them from disappearing because they are contingent. They will disappear immediately if the cause of their existence not continuously looking at them and keeping them in existence. So that's qawam. He gives two reasons. One is بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض. In most tafsir, if you go for what it was says, the letter here for the superiority or the fadl or the excessive ranking of one of them over the other. All the people say because men are superior to women. That's what the tafsir. No, it says قوام بعض بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض. Allah made men superior to women and more capable in earning, and made women more capable of motherhood, and this they have more right on the children than the husband. This one is superior in some aspect, this is superior in another aspect. So ما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض is not that the men are superior to the women generally, and that's the reason for قوامة الرجال. No, the قوامة is the superiority in capability of earning and the muscle power. And most works usually, until now, needs muscle power. Even many jobs in intellectual domain and physics and so on, and hard sciences, engineering requires more mathematical mindset, not artistic beautification mindset, where women are more superior generally. It seems to me all research points in that direction. So there will be more earning in that. Women will be always superior in being mothers and so on. Man will never become like a woman in motherhood. Whatever he doesn't have the hormones, he doesn't have the biological structure for that. So But you find let's say because men are superior to women. That's the explanation. No, they're not superior to men in every respect. They're superior in certain aspect, and women are superior to men in another aspect. And وبما أنفقوا منه, because that's what spent from their money. So that's another reason, because they are the one who are obliged to spend. So this gives them a more responsibility and certain extra rights. So if someone concludes the marriage the Western way, that the wife is supposed to be contributing half to the household, then it is natural that the man will lose some of the controlling power or of the superiority in matter of spending and so on, because he has given this power. It gives him power and responsibility. He's reduced in responsibility and reduced in power. So if you look at it this way, you see clearly the problem with the faulty argument. It has nothing to do with jobs and also this fiction that there are certain works and jobs which are suitable for men than women, and the being Hammersmith is not suitable for women. Maybe in time past because there was no machinery helping, but now who said that? But it seemed to be women did never develop the taste to work on machine tools. There may be few if you go to fundamental manufacturing, machine manufacturers or machine tools are used. You'll find women, but you'll find majority of women, majority of men. Even now, even the Soviet Union, which declared obviously purely materialistic and so on. But if you go to the Soviet Union before it fall, for example, which has allegedly liberated women considerably, they found women are more superior to men in all medical and chemistry branches. More women are working as medical doctors and in labs than men. It seems to be they have the taste for that. And the Soviets promoted also, they gave the price of the woman of the Soviet Union for any woman who gives birth to 10 children, because they want to populate that wide country. Nobody can compete with women with that. They are the one who have to be the children. Men is just a fertilizer. They can't even be absent. If you allow yourself to fertilize a human like you fertilize animals, then you can take semen from men and just chuck them in the bin if you don't want them. I think we have to look to that thing a little bit more staunchly materialistic sometimes. This is the physical reality, you like it or not. You will never be, as a man, able to compete with women in producing children. You can't. It's not possible. So they have given this branch and given the full authority. And this is an essential, important part of human life, is to give the torch of life to the next generation. Unless you advocate monastery and extinction of humanity, like in Menachism, they call it in English, Mani, the Christian dualist, who said the best thing for this world is that it get extinct, so that the devil and the evil will be separated from the good. And for that, the best thing is to abstain from marriage until all humanity is extinct. Great solution, but I don't think this is what Allah has planned or allowed. Most important, allowed. He will do the extinction when he decides this is the right time. It's not for us to do. So you have to go connect that to the philosophical background also. There's no escape from that. I don't think that the issue with certain jobs and so on was not available in time past and so on. No. I think the Arab before Islam, they were letting women work like horses. They are the one who are running behind the camels. They are milking the cows, who doing most work.
I think maybe as this progressed, maybe it's because.
But they still regard them as superior, Jahiliyyah arrogance. And Allah defeated that completely and finished the Quran and through the instruction and the work of Messenger of Allah.
Let's see what the practical import is with this, inshallah.
Strength. So now you have the women who think that there was like a male conspiracy and it's time for them to rebel. And you have the men who don't recognize that things have changed and women now have like the earning potential that men have. So nowadays, like here's what happens within the Muslim family. So they like two working people get married, and Islam does not prohibit women from working. You know the hadith of Khalat Jabir when she went out during her period, she went out to tend to her orchard. And she was told to go back home, and then she went to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, you know, go out into your orchard, maybe you will be able to get or take care of yourself.
The hadith, just a clarification, the hadith is that the people told her, I think because she was widowed and divorced, she cannot go out, not generally. And the women were doing most plantation work, as a matter of fact. We know the story of Asma, that she said when as Zubayr, when he had a horse, and she was supposed to attend to the horse, and I was attending to it. It was so hard until Abu Bakr got some money after some conquest and sent me a slave girl or so to help me with that, as if I were a slave and I was released from prison. So we're doing that. And Ibn Hazm answered to that, say he could not oblige her to do that, but she doing it as a charity, or afraid that he will beat her up, because Zubayr was a wife beater. That's it. Was not a good character in his marital life. And the Messiah said this clearly. Some women came here beaten up. Those who beat their wives are not the best of you. Zubayr is one of them. Even if he's a great mujahid and mubashar of Jannah, but that's a bad aspect of his character, miserable aspect of his character. But that woman, Jabir's auntie, is not that they wanted to prevent her from work. No, because they thought she has to sit idda at home. I think it was a divorce or was it death idda. We have to check the hadith. Anyway, it was a idda. But the people were happy with women working for them. But they were as arrogant men sitting there, like now Bedouins until recently, drinking coffee, and the women are baking their back for their work. In other societies where, for example, in societies which have khamr before Islam and after Islam, also non-Muslims, they have khamr. Women became skilled in certain societies. I don't remember which one. I don't think it's in Greece. I think it's Abyssinia and certain countries. They were the one who keeping the secret how to make beer, how to make wine. And that gave them an enormous power and dominance. They become the one qawama, the family, because they have the secret.
Wow.
The men need the khamr for their own enjoyment, or to selling it to get some money. So the women exercise power through that.
I admire their restraint on not telling you blabbing.
Yeah.
Okay. Shall I carry on playing yourself?
Yeah, you can continue. Just clarify. The hadith of Jabir is not a general habit of the people. No, they were working in the plantation all the time. Only that because she was an idda and the people misunderstood that. I think it was a death idda, but we have to verify the hadith. Anyways, a technical issue in fact of no great importance, because the Quran says the divorced woman should not leave the household, and they should not be forced out unless they commit a fahisha. People misunderstood that leaving the house is leaving the house to visit someone or going to the market. Well, no, leaving the house, they should not abolish the household completely, take their bags and leave completely until the idda is over, because that's their right, and they should be holding there, especially if it is not a final divorce, if there's a possibility of raja. If she leaves, then there's no hope for raja, no hope for reconciliation. So she'd hold the position. And if the husband doesn't like, especially if in the case of the first and second divorce, you can tell him, you can't go out if you want. I'm not going. It's my house. I'm staying here. That's the meaning. Not that you cannot go for work. But the people misunderstood that. And the hadith, yeah, I think that's the Jabir auntie was divorced. The people misunderstood that they should not leave the house, not leave it at all, except maybe for necessity of the bathroom, because the bathrooms were outside of the city. No. It's meaning not leave the house completely, take the bags and so on and depart the house, give up the household. No, should not. That's the meaning of not going out for work or visiting someone and things like that. And there's some fabricated hadith about things like that, but they can be scrutinized and shown to be weak. And most of that has done, I think, part of it has done by Ibn Hazm, but further work must be done in that direction. But back to the issue, yeah, what the two sheikhs are saying.
Fodder for Zubayr's horse for 3 miles back and forth and so on. So Islam did not prevent women from working outside, but Islam wanted 2 things, and it's clear: for them to prioritize their family and for them to work within environments conducive to their values. Modesty is a signature characteristic of Islam. So Islam wanted these women to observe these 2 things: prioritize their family and work in environments that are conducive to maintaining their Islamic values. Having said that, if you have 2 family physicians get married, for instance, and they bring in the same income, and then because we've been trying to tell women that Islam basically gives you everything, modernity gives you and more. So we're trying to say to them, his money is his and yours, and your money is yours only. Okay, so she expects that he will be spending and she will be saving her income. And she may even go as far as expecting that he would be spending and splitting his savings, and she could save all of her income. And then she expects that he will also, basically, since she goes out to work, that he would also be flexible because she'll come back tired and she will not be able to make dinner. So should be flexible enough to make his own dinner and stuff like this. And he should pay for childcare and all of that. It does, you know, what nonsense is that? How could this be considered equitable in any way? And then at the same time, you will have a man who expects that.
I don't know. I think the whole premise is wrong again. The whole starting point is wrong. So Islam doesn't work from work and so on. It's not all can work, whatever suitable work. Now they said about values and so on. What does it mean with values? If they mean the matter of that a Muslim woman had to cover her awra is bigger than the awra of the man, this applies to all non-mahram and going out of home. Going up to the bathroom, if the bathroom is outside, like in time past, which is not anymore, or going out for just for in the park to enjoy the nice smell of roses or whatever it is, she has to cover her awra is bigger by Allah design in the body, in the chemistry and physiology, and by the divine injunction. That's it. Also, there's a prohibition of to be in seclusion without a mahram. So at work, there should be no seclusion. A seclusion meaning a place which you could have intimacy without being disturbed. So a closed door. So if you are a secretary, then the door should be open. And the boss would not allow to close the door. That's it. If he doesn't like it, he can strike his head against the wall. But this is no problem. You are dressed Islamic as a Muslim woman. Your obligation, obviously. A kafir woman will not dress. To the hell with her. They don't care. But let's say a Muslim woman, that obligation to be dressing properly applies everywhere. Not only here. And no seclusion apply in her house, apply overland if she's traveling alone on a camel back to Hajj, like the woman who her husband was going to register for Ghazwat Kada wa Kada, famous Hadith Ghazwat Kada wa Kada, and the messenger was saying no woman should be in seclusion with a man unless there is a mahram. And the man understood immediately this applied to his wife. She's going for Hajj and Umrah. She's traveling alone between Mecca and Medina at that time, meaning there will be big stretches of the travel will be at night for about 10 days, and they will be in places where at night in the desert side you are in seclusion because the night is like a closed door. So who will be with her? So we said, Messenger of Allah, he responded, my wife is going for Hajj and Umrah. I have prescribed for this Ghazwat Kada wa Kada. The Messenger said, go cancel your subscription and go registration and go with that woman. And Ibn Abbas understood that. And then some Sahaba understood that, say no woman should travel over 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, except with that. No, it's not about travel. And this is another mistake of it about issues of women, but we have to clarify that and collect all the issues about non-traveling without mahram. It is that reason. It's not the travel itself. It is the travel in which by necessity there will be seclusion or either de facto or de jure seclusion. Because at night, if you are alone, you have to go to the roadside somewhere, maybe a little bit 50 meters, because it's not desirable, even prohibited, to sleep on the roadside or in the middle of the valley because of possibility of sudden current and so on. So to the side, you will be off the road, and because of the darkness, it will be any man coming will be with you in a seclusion. So to prevent any seclusion, which can happen, you have to have a mahram. Or 1 or 2 other women, which makes seclusion impossible. Because if you have 2 or 3 women in one place, there's no seclusion for men coming. And there's also issues of security. That's an extra issue, but independent of that. So that's again a misunderstanding. So to go back, no seclusion. There's a place where you can lock the door and have intimacy undisturbed, or far away off the road in the darkness, traveling alone. That would be a seclusion, essentially. Or traveling overland with a taxi driver alone, because he can veer out of the road 50 and behind some side hills and so on, and there's seclusion, the possibility of intercourse, then it is not allowed to be in such a situation. That's the reason. That's it. That's all. This applies everywhere. As if it would work or non-work, apply to all life situations. And the same with the stressing, has to apply anything outside the house, because your house is your domain where you have absolute authority, and nobody should come in or look in without your permission. And then you can't take liberty. You can't be naked at home. Nobody should disturb you. And that's the reason if someone looks in a house from a hole or something like that, you are at liberty to pluck out his eye, and he loses any right for compensation or retribution. So that's it. Simple. Straightforward. No complication. The people made it complicated by imagining things there which is not in the nas there. They imagine things which are not there. That's the problem. With the whole discussion, I don't see where that makes sense. So in the certain society, women will be doing more work. Like, for example, in many parts of India, women are doing more work in the field and so on than men. And they have usually, and people complain that certain areas of India, women are tougher than men, and they command men around, and men are weak. People call it weak. No, it's not a situation. They have the power. They have the power of money. And they don't have, obviously, most men and women in the world usually don't have the piety to respect the partner and treat him with dignity, even if he is with less income. Unfortunately, humans have this weakness unless they have a high level of piety and respect for the partner, so it should be. But this is a high level of morality. Talk about the basic, and then you'll find many women abusing their husband. 50% of women in India beat up their husbands. Nobody will believe that unless you see the official statistics. So this debate about the society, who works more, who does more, especially when the problem was within the Arab society, until he said the Bedouins, that he works less and he wants to be treated like a king. It doesn't work this way. That's what, if it had been equitable, yeah, you work more, you have all the respect. I'm not going to command you not to visit your parents just out of arrogance. Many men, even in India, Pakistan, you don't go to, even it's a Hindu tradition that the moment a woman marries, she never go to their family house. It's a big, and the family never visits her. It's a big no-no. And if they visit, they pay as if they're coming to the hotel. It's somehow shameless, shameful. It's coming from some old pagan tradition. It's not Islam. The relation will be established and extended, become nice and so on. That's it. And you expect the husband, the reason the husband not to tell his wife, don't visit your parents, I don't like them. If you don't like them, tell your wife, I have a conflict with your dad. I'll bring you to visit them, or I give you company, or you go there in a safe way, and they will not go with you. They have to understand that. That should be done reasonably this way. Not to say, even if he profits her going for her father's house, she has to obey. No, because he's ordering haram. He's ordering to cut the relation of kin. You don't like the father, fine, stay away.
This is interesting because they'll be discussing obedience and ma'ruf
Yeah.
in a moment, inshallah.
That's a problem. They come to some accumulated fiqh mistakes and wrong definitions and misquoted cases, and just simply ignore all of these fundamental aspects.
I think maybe because they haven't approached it from the ground up, from a Sunni point of view, because they're taking individual practical issues and trying to navigate those. Because I can see where they're coming from in terms of like, so as a landscape changes, as people learning potential changes, how are we going to
landscapes change in time past? Like, for example, Asma, when she was, he mentioned going 3 miles walk to attend to the horse, because Zubayr ordered her to do that, and she didn't want to have, either she was very charitable or she was afraid of being beaten up. And then her father came to the rescue by sending a slave girl or say a slave boy to help her, and that slave took over the management of the horse. And Asma said, as if my father released me from slavery on myself. But that's because Zubayr is an odd character, and she chose not to, and ultimately it ended in divorce anyway. The final blow was that one day, as Zubayr was beating her with she reported herself that he used to have the hanger similar to our hanger now. It have a stick in the hanging stick. He take the hanger, break it, take the stick, and beat the woman until the stick breaks. He's a very nasty character in treating women. He has some deep complexes and issues there. Despite being a great mujahid and so on, human beings are like that. Sometimes they have deficiency in certain quarter, and it has to be managed.
And in that instance, I mean, Khula would be on the grounds anyway.
And that Asma accepted that and so on. It is her choice.
I mean, in an instance like that,
when her son Abdullah became an adult man, Zubayr was beating her up and closing the door. And Abdullah knocked the door, said, if you enter, I will divorce your mother. Say, you make your mother a subject of your divorce, I am entering. And she got divorced. She was relieved from him after so many years. Anyway, but this is, we don't take an odd example of someone who have a psychological problem or bringing a problem, because he was brought up very, 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 very harshly by his mother, the auntie of the Prophet Safiya, was very, very stiff, very harsh. And her husband was even harsher. it's so tough that when Hamza murdered, she's the full sister of Hamza, same mother, same father, was murdered. She came to Uhud, and then Ali, Ali and Zubayr were both terrified. Zubayr said, tell the catastrophe to your auntie. Zubayr said, no, you tell the catastrophe to your mother. And then when she came, they wanted to stop her. There's blood here and mess and so on. Don't come. And she was like, get lost. You have no mother. Maybe this upbringing is the problem. A person knows this upbringing, then he to manage it. That's unfortunately. Does not mean that upbringing was good. Muslims should avoid that, but will be Muslim doing that, unfortunately. We'll have such odd cases.
On a situation like that, Khula would be warranted then, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Even before, if someone beat his wife like that, she can sue at the court. Not khul. She can get the solution of the marriage. Because khul is meaning that both parties agree. Khul is happened the following way. The prime example of khul is that the spokesman of the Messenger of Allah, Thabit ibn Qais ibn Shammas, he was an eloquent, and when a delegation comes, he's the one who talks in behalf of the Prophet. They call him the speaker or the khatib. He gives the usual the Arabic habit is that when a tribe visits another tribe, they say, this is our khatib. He stands up and give a khutbah, give like an introduction in a sermon style, in a speech style. And he was the speaker of the Messenger of Allah. And then one day there were some Arab tribal chieftains came and so on, and the Prophet did not have a guest house at that time. They were living humbly. So they take these few guys to your house, and Umar take those, Abu Bakr take those. And then suddenly the wife of Thabit came to Messenger of Allah, said, 2 days ago you sent some of the delegation with Thabit ibn Qais, and when they came in, obviously these were Bedouins, tall and beautiful and well grown in the desert atmosphere and best times. You become very healthy. If you survive the early childhood problems, you become extremely healthy and good looking. And these seem to be very good looking. I say, when he came, I noticed that he's the shortest and the ugliest and the darkest. And suddenly I felt that I'm even unable to cohabit with him. I'm afraid to commit kufr in Islam. Find me a solution. Any other issues? No, there's no other issues. He's a good husband. He smells good. He does everything. So there's no other complaint. That's something happened in the universe by act of Allah in her. I would say Allah made that to have the regulation. So he called Thabit Qais, said, she says that and that. And Thabit said, but I gave her, beside the dowry, I gave her a complete plantation. It seems to be she's a very beautiful woman and spoiled. I think, Allah, we don't know, but that's just upbringing. And he says, are you willing to retain his garden to him in as a compensation? She said, yes. Take your garden, let her go. That's the whole agreement against the compensation. And the Quran says that clearly. وإن امرأة خافت بعدها نشوزا أو إعراضا فلا جناح عليهما إن صالحا صلحا والصلح خير وأحضرت الأنفس الشح. Don't be too stingy and so on with each other, because the human nature is to be stingy, holding to money, holding to wealth, holding to what you have, because you are a deficient being, you are a contingent being, you need something to survive. Allah is rich, He doesn't need anything. But try to be not as stingy, but make a reasonable agreement. الصلح خير. Agreement, that's the basic of khul. But the other one, in the case of beating, case where I think she should have asked Allah to dissolve the marriage, because she definitely violating the limit of good behavior. But she did it. She said this again. But go back to the issue. So all these arguments are really hand-waving arguments. They don't stand real scrutiny. If you look at this society, this society, that, there was society in time past, women were more dominant than men, and vice versa. And all will be managed by Sharia properly. For example, the society women are more dominant and have more money. Let us see. Then the husband could say, okay, for such a woman, you have sufficient money, but you don't have a husband and is not allowed to have zina or to have just casual relation, boyfriend. Let's make an agreement. I marry you and so on. You support yourself. I'm responsible for all my support, or you support both of us in return of this and this and these facilities. That's like Mysyaar, for example, agreement. If the agreement is reasonable, violating no Sharia injunction, it's okay. Then this is agreed upon arrangement. It can be done.
think they'll be discussing some of this later. I mean, there is it's more just to get everything out in the open so you can get a good commentary on it, because it's going to be going to certain contemporary issues.
But the discussion will be again faulty, going to individual rulings without going to the fundamental structure.
Yeah, I think you're always going to have that problem because people, the insistence on going the classical route. Anyway, let's
With the classical route, mean the route which the Jahiliyyah in its counter-revolution succeeded in part, at least, hijacking the ruling system and messing up a little bit of the social system. That's it. That's unfortunately. Instead of going, so that's not Islam. This is that scholar and that scholar, they don't represent Islam.